My name is Jared Perry. I'm a lieutenant here at the St. George Police Department. I'm currently assigned as a watch commander for the swing shift. My days are from Sunday through Wednesday, so the first half of the week. Swing shifts are a little bit unique, mainly because of the hours we work. My shift starts at 1 o'clock and ends at 11 o'clock at night. Our officers come in an hour later, so at 2 o'clock, and then they go home at midnight. And so that is one of the busier times for calls for service during the day for the police department. And so one thing unique about swing shifts is they tend to have a wide variety or spectrum of calls. Earlier on in the day, we may deal with a lot of traffic issues. We may have a lot of traffic accidents, especially during commuting hours. And so our officers may be handling a lot of accidents around 4, 5, 6 o'clock at night during the commuting time. We tend to also deal with a lot of family fight issues as the night goes on. It's kind of interesting. It calls progressively change from more routine type things like frauds earlier in the day to family fights, and then more intoxicated type calls later at night. So one of the reasons I choose to work swing shifts is just because of the variety of calls and the things that we deal with. So a typical day will begin with officers showing up for what we call a roll call. We'll spend about a half hour having a briefing, and during that time the officers can gain information about situations that the other shift, the day shift during the day, may have dealt with. We also talk about officer safety issues and do training during that time period. Discuss cases that may have happened earlier that week. It's just a good time for the team to come together and learn something new, share information, pass on information as needed, and it's a collaborative effort for sure. I mean, there's a day shift, a swing shift, and a graveyard shift, and a lot of times issues from one shift will certainly run over into the other, so we need to make sure that we have a way of communicating with that. Swing shifts deal with a number of calls. I've got a list here of things that we tend to deal with. I mentioned traffic already. During those commuting hours, we do have a lot of traffic issues, a lot of accidents. We do have a traffic division, but they got to go home too at some point, so the swing shift tends to need to handle a lot of those. And just domestic disturbances, we get a lot of medical calls, sexual offenses, fraud and scams. A lot of times people will report those at night, but the follow-up will probably be done by a detective or the following day. Mental health issues, we're starting to see a lot of those, especially with homeless issues that we face. They tend to kind of go hand in hand at times, and so as you might imagine, during those time periods into the evening, a lot of those calls come out. Drugs, theft, burglary, assaults, and lost children. Believe it or not, we actually deal with that quite a bit, and it's not only lost children, but we may have some elderly people with dementia or things like that get lost, and so from time to time we have to find them as well. During swing shift, there's never a lack for anything to do. So some of the struggles with the swing shift, I would say one of the most challenging things we face is the call volume. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. There can be more calls than officers to handle those calls. Depending on the type of call it is too, some calls take a number of officers to handle correctly and safely. And so I know that can be frustrating. Our officers feel overwhelmed at times just for the volume. And so it comes down to basically prioritizing the calls on the screen. I think at times even citizens can be frustrated when an officer isn't getting to their call as quickly as they would like. But it does come down to being able to prioritize what's the most important thing to handle right now. The police department and police work in general, we have to prioritize those things, and public safety certainly comes first. And so those calls that require some kind of action to be taken to make sure a situation is dealt with or neutralized for the safety of our community, that has to be dealt with first. And then we move on to the other things, and frauds and things of that nature while they're important, it's not imperative that they happen now. Sometimes some of those calls get put on the back burner until we have the resources that can handle them. Some of the benefits for working a swing shift as a police officer, I think some of our younger officers really like working them just because it is a very proactive shift. There's a lot that happens. There's a wide variety of things that happen. You never know what you're going to be doing each day as you come in. And for me, that's something, even after over 20 years of doing this, that's something I still enjoy, is just not knowing what my day is going to bring at times when I come in, and just being able to handle situations. So when it comes to police work, one of the most important aspects is report preparation, and it's critical. In my career, I've seen that change quite a bit. Now we have body cameras. Much of what we do is documented that way. But we still have to document very thoroughly what occurs. And so police reports is a way of doing that. A large function of my job as a watch commander is reviewing reports. And so as the officers on my shift prepare those, they submit them to me. I make sure that the accompanying paperwork is prepared and all the attachments and any kind of photographs or video or anything that might be associated with that is with the report. And then I proofread them, just make sure that they're in a state where we can move them forward for whatever is needed as far as the legal system is concerned. And so officers spend a number of hours, probably each shift, preparing reports. It's very time consuming. I know that can be one of the frustrating things as an officer too, is just getting bogged down with that workload. And so we make it a point that when an officer handles a call, they try to handle it from A to Z. Just finish it, get in, get the report done before moving on to something else. We try to make sure our staffing is adequate to allow for that, just so we don't get officers stretched too thin with too many things going at once. So yeah, from time to time that does happen where we get multiple in-progress calls going on. And so in progress, when you hear that term in police work, it means calls that are maybe an active fight, maybe an active family fight, maybe an assault, maybe an intoxication. It's just something actively going on right now that's in progress, that's requiring attention now. It's not uncommon to have multiple events like that occurring at once. And so, yeah, it can be very resource taxing. Luckily, we have a great working relationship with the other agencies around us. And I think we've all had to rely on each other numerous times to make sure that we can plug in all the holes. We work with the county, and they're very good about stepping in and helping out wherever they can. And I've even seen it where they sense that we're in trouble with the situation just because of our calls, and they'll just step in and start helping them. As a watch commander, that is one of my responsibilities, is to make sure that our priorities are being met. Even from time to time, I'll jump up and go out and help. The sergeants do the same thing. Somehow we find a way to make it work. And so we do have to pool resources, and it's all the law enforcement agencies in our area, as well as medical, and then other resources that also can help with various calls for service. So